She was just another fighter pilot in the skydiscipline.com and trained to follow orders without hesitation. To the world below, she was invisible, a small shape cutting through the blue at impossible speed. To the radar screen, she was nothing more than a blinking dot, identified by a call sign and a string of numbers. No name, no story, just data. But inside that cockpit, sealed behind layers of reinforced glass and metal, sat a human being carrying years of sacrifice, relentless training, and a kind of courage that never made headlines. She had earned her wings the hard way. Endless early mornings, sleepless nights, and thousands of hours spent mastering machines that showed no mercy for mistakes. Every muscle memory in her body had been drilled into place through repetition and discipline. She had learned how to stay calm when alarms screamed, how to breathe when fear tried to take over, and how to trust her training even when instinct begged her to panic. Emotion had no place in the cockpit. That was the rule. Feel later, fly now. The sky that morning was deceptively peaceful. Clear blue stretched endlessly in every direction, broken only by thin streaks of cloud far below. The sun glinted off the canopy, flooding the cockpit with light. From this altitude, the world looked calm and distant, almost unreal. Cities shrank into patterns. Rivers turned into silver threads. Problems seemed small from up here. That illusion was one every pilot understood well, because the sky, no matter how beautiful, could turn deadly in seconds. Her jet moved smoothly, the engine's steady roar a familiar companion. Every vibration, every hum, every subtle shift in pressure told her the aircraft was healthy and responded perfectly. She scanned her instruments with practiced ease, eyes moving automatically from altitude to speed, fuel levels to navigation. Nothing was out of place. Everything was exactly as it should be. This was a routine mission, a scheduled patrol. The kind of flight pilots often referred to as uneventful, the best kind. No hostile activity, no emergency drills, no surprises. The mission briefing earlier that day had been short and straightforward. Weather, clear. Threat level, minimal. Objective, maintain air presence and return to base. It was the kind of day where muscle memory did most of the work. Her call sign echoed in a helmet as command checked in. Calm voices, professional tone, standard procedures. She responded automatically, her voice steady and controlled, betraying none of the thoughts running quietly beneath the surface. She had learned long ago that confidence in the air wasn't about arrogance, it was about preparation. And she was prepared, she thought, briefly, about the path that had brought her here, about the countless moments people had doubted her before they ever saw her fly, about the training instructors who had pushed her harder than most, not because they expected her to fail, but because they wanted to be certain she wouldn't. She remembered the first time she'd climbed into a fighter jet, heart pounding, hands shaking just slightly as she'd gripped the controls. That fear had never completely disappeared. It had simply learned to stay quiet. Pilots like her didn't chase glory. They chased precision, survival, completion of the mission. Medals came later, if they came at all. Most flights ended without applause, without recognition. You took off, you did your job, you landed, and the world kept turning, unaware of how thin the line had been between calm and catastrophe. She flew in formation with others, their aircraft maintaining perfect spacing, a silent choreography in the sky. Each pilot trusted the others completely. At these speeds and altitudes, trust wasn't optional, it was life-saving. A single mistake could ripple through the formation in seconds. But today, there were no mistakes. Everything flowed exactly as designed. Time passed differently in the cockpit. Minutes stretched. The mind settled into a focused rhythm, alert but relaxed. She monitored fuel consumption, adjusted course slightly, acknowledged routine communications. There was nothing remarkable about the flight, and that was the point. Most history-changing moments don't announce themselves. They arrive quietly, disguised as ordinary days. Below her, the earth rolled on, unaware of her presence. People went about their lives, commuting, working, arguing, dreaming, never knowing that a pilot passed overhead, entrusted with a machine capable of immense, with power and destruction, yet hoping never to use it. That was the paradox of her role, trained for war, praying for peace. Inside the cockpit, silence filled the gaps between radio calls. She welcomed it. Silence meant stability. Silence meant control. Her breathing was slow and measured, perfectly synced with the aircraft's movements. She felt connected to the jet in a way that was difficult to explain to anyone who had never flown. It wasn't just a machine, it was an extension of her body, responding instantly to the slightest input. She had learned to compartmentalize everything else. Personal worries stayed on the ground. Fear stayed locked away. Doubt had no seat in the cockpit. Up here, clarity mattered more than anything. Decisions had to be made in fractions of a second, with lives sometimes hanging in the balance. Hesitation could be fatal. And yet, beneath that discipline, she was still human. She thought about how easily this mission could have been forgotten. Just another flight logged. Another line in a record book. Another safe return. She would land, remove her helmet, debrief and prepare for the next assignment. No one would speak of this day again. It would blend into the long list of days where nothing happened. She had no idea that within hours, people would remember this flight forever. At that moment, nothing hinted at what was coming. No warning lights, no hostile radar pings, no frantic voices on the radio. The sky remained calm. The mission remained routine. History remained asleep. She adjusted her course slightly, maintaining formation, eyes alert but relaxed. Everything she saw confirmed the briefing. Clear skies, no enemy contact, no anomalies, the kind of flight every pilot hopes for and rarely talks about. But the sky has a way of changing without warning, and sometimes the most extraordinary moments begin in complete silence, when everything seems normal and no one suspects that a single decision, still waiting somewhere ahead, is about to redefine who a person truly is. Up there, miles above the earth, she was still just another fighter pilot, for now. Mid-flight, her radio crackled. At first it was just a faint whisper, almost indistinguishable from the static that always filled the airwaves. Pilots learned early that the radio is both a lifeline and a source of distraction. Every beep, every hiss, every fragment of a voice demands attention, but most of it is irrelevant. Weather updates, routine check-ins, background chatter from other formations, nothing that requires urgent action. So, when she first heard the sound, she barely registered it. A faint crackle, a muted, trembling voice trying to pierce the layers of interference. Then it came again, louder this time, clearer. Mayday. Send help. The words were fragmented, ragged, almost drowned in static. But they carried a weight that immediately pulled her attention away from the routine. Her instincts screamed that this was no ordinary malfunction or automated test signal. This was a human being calling for life, in terror, on the other end of the invisible waves connecting her jet to the world below. She sat up straighter in the cockpit, her fingers tightening on the controls, eyes darting to her instruments, trying to locate the source. Her training kicked in immediately. Protocol demanded caution. The voice didn't match any known aircraft in the zone. Air traffic records showed no other friendly or allied jets at that altitude and heading. It could be a hoax, a technical glitch, something meant to distract pilots from their mission. Everything she had learned over years of grueling preparation told her to follow protocol. Ignore it, stay with the formation, and complete the mission. She tapped her headset. Come on, I'm receiving a distress signal. Can you verify static? Then the calm, clipped voice of command, full of authority, full of rules. Ignore it. Maintain formation. Return to your assigned mission. That is an order. Protocol was clear. Obedience was not optional. In the military, failure to follow orders could end careers or worse. Every pilot knows the cost of disobedience. But even as her training screamed at her to comply, a deeper instinct, one that no manual could teach, flared to life. That voice, fear in it. The desperation was real. Terribly real. And it was close. She hesitated. One heartbeat passed, then another. In those suspended moments, time seemed to stretch unnaturally. Every second was heavy, charged with an electric tension. The hum of her engine, the slight vibration of the controls, the faint whistle of air rushing past her canopy, they all seemed distant now. All she could focus on was that fragile, terrified voice calling from somewhere in the sky. Her mind raced. What if it was a pilot from an allied squadron who had gone off course? What if the signal was from someone in a civilian plane, caught unexpectedly in military airspace? The possibilities were endless, and the consequences of acting or failing to act were equally severe. Following orders would keep her safe, keep her career intact, but obeying protocol could mean leaving someone to die, trapped in a metal shell hurtling toward the ground. She knew the theory well. Training scenarios drilled the same lesson into every pilot over and over. Assess, prioritize, execute. That difference this time was painfully obvious. Assessing the situation wasn't enough. Prioritizing meant choosing between obedience and humanity. Executing would demand courage that no simulator could provide. She listened again. The voice came, through raw and broken pleas. Help. The transmission cut off mid-play, leaving only static. She felt her chest tightened. She was not supposed to let emotions cloud judgment, but there it was, a visceral reaction she couldn't suppress. Her heart beat faster. A mix of fear and adrenaline surged through her veins. She reminded herself of the rules, the chain of command, the dangers of disobedience. Every thought screamed at her to ignore the signal. Every instinct told her to stay in formation. And yet, she couldn't. She adjusted her course slightly, her mind calculating every risk. She reviewed her options quickly. Option 1, obey command. Ignore the voice. Return to formation. Safe, predictable, career intact. No immediate danger to herself. but the cost was obvious. Someone's life was at stake. Someone was trapped, possibly injured, possibly scared, possibly dying, and she would walk away, leaving them alone. That thought made her stomach churn. Option 2. Break formation, pursue the source of the distress call. Assess and attempt rescue if possible. Dangerous, unpredictable, against orders. High risk of failure, potentially mundane, potentially fatal. But the reward: a life saved, a chance to make a difference when it mattered most. For a brief, suspended moment, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Decisions like this were supposed to be theoretical, practiced in simulators under controlled conditions. Not real, not with lives actually hanging in the balance. Yet here it was, real and immediate. Her mind raced through calculations, fuel levels, weather conditions, possible flight paths. She considered worst-case scenarios: collision, mechanical failure, hostile interception, disorientation. Each option carried risk, each variable a possible disaster. But then she felt it, a sense of clarity that often comes only in moments of extreme necessity. Her instincts, sharpened by years of flying, whispered one truth: some things are bigger than protocol. Some lives matter more than orders. She inhaled deeply, steadying her breath. Her eyes scanned the sky, scanning instruments, searching for clues. Then, with a controlled motion, she nudged her controls. The jet responded instantly. Sleek, powerful, deadly in its precision, it obeyed her every command. She made the first choice of her life as a pilot. She broke formation. The decision was instantaneous, yet every second stretched into an eternity. Other pilots called over the radio, confusion in their voices, questions, demands for explanation. She responded briefly, clipped, professional, hiding everything, following a distress call. "Will report." Command's voice returned immediately, sharp and unyielding. "Return to formation. You are in violation of orders." She ignored it, not out of arrogance, not out of rebellion, but out of instinctive understanding that this was bigger than her, bigger than the rules, bigger than protocol. Humanity demanded it. Courage required it. Her jet banked gently, slipping out of the carefully maintained formation and toward the unknown. Her instruments flashed. Her systems calculated trajectory and fuel burn. The autopilot adjusted for speed and wind. Every variable was accounted for. She trusted the machine because she trusted herself, and vice versa. The static returned. The voice, weak but persistent, broke through again. "Please." I don't know how much longer. It cut out again, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. She pressed on, following the faint signal, tracing it across the open sky. Every mile brought her closer, but also deeper into danger. Restricted airspace, unstable weather patterns, unpredictable turbulence, all of it loomed ahead. She knew the risks. She felt them in the pit of her stomach. Yet she pressed forward. Time seemed to stretch and bend. The calm, routine flight of a few moments ago was gone. It had been replaced by a tense ballet of calculation, instinct, and unspoken courage. She adjusted her course again, eyes darting between instruments, horizon, and radar. Every decision was a potential tipping point. Every movement a possible difference between life and death. And still, the voice persisted. Small, fragile, human, trembling through the static, carrying fear, urgency, and hope. It reminded her why she had become a pilot in the first place: not for medals, not for recognition, not for orders, but for moments like this. Moments where skill and courage could intersect to save a life. Moments where humanity mattered more than protocol. Then she made the unthinkable choice. Not impulsively, not recklessly, but with absolute clarity. She would pursue the source of that distress signal, come what may. She would face the risks, challenge the rules, and step into the unknown to help someone who had no other hope. The radio crackled again, faint but real, carrying the terrified plea that had started it all. Her hands tightened on the controls. Her eyes scanned the horizon, and she prepared for the unknown. Whatever lay ahead: storm, mechanical failure, danger, or even death. She had made her choice, and in that choice she had become something more than just another pilot. For the first time that day, as she accelerated toward the source of that broken, terrified voice, she realized she was no longer flying for herself, for orders, or for routine. She was flying for someone else's life. And sometimes, in the heart of the sky, that is the only reason that matters. Against direct orders, she broke formation. Every instinct drilled into her over years of training screamed at her to stop, to obey, to fall back into line. Every protocol, every rule, every chain of command instruction she had memorized and internalized since her first day as a cadet demanded compliance. Yet, the voice she had heard, the desperate, trembling plea for help, refused to leave her mind. It echoed with a clarity that no radio static could distort. Someone was out there. Someone was depending on her. and that knowledge overrode everything else. She stole a glance at her fuel gauge. The numbers were already flashing warnings. Marginal reserves, rapidly declining. In a few minutes, if she didn't find a safe place to refuel or return to base, she would be pushing her jet to its limits. Every pilot learns early that fuel is life. Run out of it, and the sky stops being a place of freedom and becomes a trap of steel and fire. She knew the risks intimately. She knew the calculations in her mind by heart: miles to target, remaining fuel, wind patterns, potential emergency landing zones. Yet even with all the numbers screaming danger, she pressed on. The clouds were starting to gather, thin, wispy at first, brushing past her at high altitude, but growing, darkening, spreading. The kind of weather that makes even the most seasoned pilots uneasy. She adjusted her instruments, keeping a careful eye on altimeter, speed, and pitch. Turbulence was subtle at first, gentle shakes that made her feel the invisible currents tugging at the aircraft, but she knew this was only the beginning. Weather has a way of turning violent without warning. Up here, miles above the Earth, a small miscalculation could spiral into catastrophe in a matter of seconds. Her mind raced, calculating every scenario, weighing every option. Turn back now, obey the orders, preserve her career and her life safe, predictable, professional, or press on, defy protocol, gamble, everything she had on a single chance to save someone who might already be dying. The logical, trained part of her screamed at her to turn around, but the human part, the part no training manual could ever prepare her for, pushed forward. Courage, she realized, is not the absence of fear. It is the willingness to move through it when everything in you begs to stop. Her navigation system indicated that the coordinates of the distress signal were moving slightly, unpredictably. Whoever was calling for help was not stationary. Panic, injury, or malfunction could be causing erratic movement. Every new data point she received seemed to amplify the danger. Restricted airspace lay ahead, officially prohibited for her mission. It was patrolled and monitored, a zone that carried both legal and military consequences. No pilot ever wanted to enter it without explicit permission. Yet she had no permission and no time to request it. The person she was trying to reach had no safety net. No protocol could save them, but her action lights on her dashboard blinked urgently. Fuel warnings, engine temperature alerts, radar signals indicating the edge of restricted zones. Each flash and beep was a reminder of the stakes. Her heart pounded, matching the rhythm of the warnings. This was not a drill, this was not a simulation. This was real, and if she failed, failure would not be measured in points or grades, would be measured in lives lost. And possibly, in her own. She pressed forward, adjusting her controls. She banked gently to the left, avoiding the first layer of clouds that threatened to break apart her line of sight. Each small maneuver was calculated, precise, designed to conserve fuel while keeping her on the path toward the unknown. Every microsecond mattered. Every decision had a ripple effect, each one capable of tipping the delicate balance between success and disaster. Her mind, trained for routine precision, now worked in overdrive. She reviewed emergency protocols she hoped never to use. Alternate landing zones, contingency routes, possible mechanical failures, systems checklists. She ran them all through her mental simulator while simultaneously maneuvering the jet through increasingly unpredictable air currents. Her hands moved with practiced ease, her eyes darting between instruments and horizon. Every calculation, every split-second decision, carried consequences measured in human lives. Yet through it all, her thoughts drifted to the voice she had heard, weak, fractured, terrified. The fear embedded in that plea haunted her more than any dashboard alarm. She imagined the person on the other end, trapped in a damaged aircraft, maybe injured, maybe panicked, every second bringing them closer to disaster. She felt the weight of their trust, unspoken but profound. They had no control over the situation, no recourse, no one to call but her, and she could not let them down. The clouds thickened. Visibility dropped. She could barely make out shapes beyond a few hundred meters. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating the sky in jagged bursts of white. Thunder rolled silently beneath her altitude, a distant but menacing rumble. Wind currents buffeted her jet, forcing her to adjust with micro-corrections that required constant attention. The danger was real, immediate, and unavoidable. Every warning light, every tremor, every shift in the instruments seemed to scream at her. Stop. Turn back. You are exceeding limits. But she didn't. She pushed through. The human will to protect, to help, to act in the face of imminent danger, gave her clarity even as the external chaos intensified. She reminded herself, the rules that governed pilots, the orders that demanded obedience. The protocols etched into her career that were designed for the majority of situations, not extraordinary emergencies. This was extraordinary. And in extraordinary moments, ordinary rules must sometimes be bent or broken. Her jet groaned under the strain. Engine temperature spiked. The wind shifted violently, tossing the aircraft side to side. She fought against the turbulence, banking, climbing, diving, compensating for each unpredictable gust. She adjusted throttle, trim, and flaps with precise movements honed by years of repetition. Every second she remained in the storm increased the risk, but every second she advanced brought her closer to the person who depended on her. Her mind alternated between fear and determination. She acknowledged the possibility of failure. She imagined every way it could go wrong: engine failure over hostile airspace, loss of control in turbulence, running out of fuel mid-rescue, miscalculating distance, misjudging speed. Each possibility was terrifying, yet alongside the fear was a resolute understanding. Inaction would guarantee death. Action, however perilous, offered a chance at life. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The sky became a battleground of clouds, light, wind, and uncertainty. Yet she moved forward, measuring each moment, weighing each choice. Her heart raced, not with panic, but with focus. The adrenaline sharpened her senses. She saw the faint outline of the other aircraft before instruments confirmed it. Damaged, spinning slightly, barely maintaining altitude. And then she understood. This was no simulation, no routine flight. The situation was exactly as urgent as she had feared. She adjusted her trajectory, closing the distance carefully, calculating fuel burn against the rapidly shifting wind. Her mind ran through a checklist of what needed to happen if she reached the aircraft. Could she guide it, shield it, stabilize it? The answers were uncertain, but she had no alternative. No one else could do this. The person calling for help had only her, and she could not fail them. Every sense was heightened. The roar of the engine, the gusts of wind, the blinding flashes of lightning all faded into background noise compared to the focus she held on the mission. She wasn't just flying anymore. She was protecting, calculating, anticipating, guiding. Every instinct, every training module, every hour spent in simulators and classrooms culminated in this single, impossible effort. And still, the danger pressed in. Every warning light, every shift in the clouds, every signal from the instruments reminded her of what was at stake. She could fail, she could crash, she could be punished for insubordination, she could die. But the possibility of success saving a human life was worth every risk. Because out there, someone was counting on her, and in that moment, against orders, against danger, against fear, she became something more than a pilot. She became a guardian of the sky, a lifeline for a stranger, a beacon of courage in the face of impossible odds. Every second, every movement, every choice mattered, and she pressed forward, into the storm, into danger, into history, determined to see her mission through, no matter the cost. The signal grew weaker, a flickering, broken thread in the endless sky, as storm clouds began to converge around her. At first, they were distant and scattered, ghostly wisps on the horizon, but now they grew darker, more threatening, blotting out the sun and casting an ominous shadow over the world below. The jet in which she had placed so much trust shuddered violently under the first assaults of the storm. The turbulence was sudden, unpredictable, a chaotic force that threatened to throw her off course or, worse, sent her tumbling into the clouds, with no control. Every vibration, every unexpected jerk of the aircraft reminded her that she was in a place where precision mattered more than ever and where the margin for error had vanished entirely. Her hands tightened on the controls instinctively. Years of training had prepared her for routine turbulence, for calculations made in calm skies and steady formations, for the minor adjustments necessary to keep the aircraft stable. But this storm was different. It did not respect calculations. It did not respond to careful maneuvers or smooth adjustments. The air itself seemed alive, surging and twisting, throwing her jet side to side, shaking her with a power that reminded her she was not the master of the sky but merely a temporary visitor in its domain. The distress signal, fragile and faltering, crackled again in her headset. It was weaker than before, each syllable cut short, each plea almost swallowed by the static that filled the line. Mayday, can't control, need help. The words were fragmented, desperate, and they which hit her harder than the worst turbulence ever could. She recognized fear when she heard it, raw and unfiltered, and she felt a pang of helplessness for the person on the other end. But unlike helplessness, which would paralyze most people, she felt a resolve tightening in her chest, a determination that she would not let this human life be lost. She pressed forward, eyes scanning her instruments and the sky around her, trying to anticipate the storm's next move. Clouds shifted unpredictably, forming walls of gray that threatened to engulf her at any moment. Lightning flashed in the distance, jagged streaks of white fire slicing across the blackened sky, illuminating the chaos in brief, blinding bursts. Thunder rolled silently beneath her altitude, a ghostly echo of the storm's rage, vibrating through the jet's frame. The wind battered her aircraft, twisting it side to side, forcing her to make rapid corrections, micro-adjustments that consumed every ounce of her focus. Then she saw it, through the thinning veil of rain and shadow. A shape emerged, a twisted silhouette against the darkness. It was unmistakably an aircraft, but damaged, battered, struggling to stay in the sky. She caught sight of it just as it began to spiral downward, the nose tilting dangerously toward the earth, the fuselage wobbling as though it could break apart at any second. Her heart seized in her chest. One pilot inside, alive, barely holding on to life, and running out of altitude with every passing second. She inhaled deeply, forcing herself to remain calm. Panic would not help. Hesitation would not help. Only precision, only focus, only courage could make a difference. She nudged her controls, positioning her jet carefully, deliberately, so that she could remain close enough to observe, to shield, to guide, but not so close as to risk collision. Every motion had to be measured, precise, as single miscalculation would be catastrophic. The pilot inside the spiraling aircraft was injured. She could see it from her angle. Slight smoke trailing from the engine, small flashes of sparks. Where metal had been dented or torn, the aircraft groaned under stress, and she felt the danger in every vibration, every uneven flap of the wings. She knew the pilot could be unconscious at any moment, or worse, benign and making small errors that could hasten disaster. The odds were stacked against survival. But she also knew that hope, even a fragile hope, could make the difference between life and death. She opened her microphone, her voice calm but commanding, cutting through the static. "This is Falcon 9, she said. "I see you. I'm here. Can you hear me?" A crackling response came almost immediately, faint, strained, but unmistakably human. "Yes, I hear you. I don't know if I can." She held herself steady. Each word was a lifeline, each instruction a potential salvation. "Stay calm, I've got you. Listen carefully. Keep your wings steady. Match my speed. Don't panic. I'll guide you through this." The pilot responded with shaky acknowledgement. She could sense the fear, the trembling in the voice, but she also sensed a glimmer of trust, fragile but real. That trust was what she focused on now, the invisible thread connecting them through the chaos of the storm, over miles of open sky. Between two fragile machines pushing against forces far beyond their control, the storm intensified. Rain lashed against the canopy, visibility dropped, and gusts of wind hit at angles that made the jets shudder violently. Lightning illuminated the other aircraft again, briefly revealing the pilot's determined, strained posture in the cockpit. She could see the subtle jerks of the controls, the micro-corrections being made to keep the aircraft from spiraling completely out of control. Every second brought them closer to disaster, yet she pressed on, inching closer, keeping the fragile aircraft within her protective shadow. She adjusted her formation around the damaged plane, not a formal formation like in training, not the calculated geometry of a squadron maneuver, but an improvised, living pattern designed to shield the weaker aircraft from the worst of the storm. She positioned herself slightly above and behind, allowing her jet to act as a windbreak, absorbing the brunt of gusts, turbulence, and erratic currents that threatened to throw the injured pilot off balance. Every small movement, every tilt of the wings, every adjustment of speed had to be perfect. Her voice never wavered. "You're doing great. Keep your wings level. Steady. Focus on my lights. Follow my lead. I'm right here. Don't give up." The pilot's responses were sporadic, often cut off by static, but she could hear the faint affirmations, the small efforts to comply. Each one was a victory, a signal that her guidance was being received, that the human connection was working despite the chaos around them. She felt the strain of the storm deep in her muscles. Her arms ached from constant adjustments, her eyes burned from intense concentration, and every nerve in her body screamed fatigue. Yet she pushed on. There was no alternative. The storm was merciless, but so was inaction. She focused only on what she could control, her movements, her voice, her guidance. The rest was outside her control, yet she refused to let it dictate. The outcome. Time became distorted. Seconds stretched into minutes. The horizon disappeared into clouds, leaving only the violent, shifting sky around her. Lightning flashed again, more frequent now, revealing glimpses of the earth rushing closer. Beneath them, she calculated descent rates, wind shear, altitude loss, and airspeed constantly, adjusting in real time to keep the damaged aircraft from spiraling completely out of control. Finally, after what felt like an eternity suspended between life and death, she managed to stabilize the injured aircraft partially, slowing its descent and keeping it within a survivable altitude range. She kept close, shielding it as best she could from the worst gusts of the storm, speaking continuously, giving instructions, encouragement, and guidance. Her words became a lifeline, a tether between survival and catastrophe. Between despair and hope, she could see the pilot beginning to regain control. Slight movements of the controls becoming more deliberate, more confident, less chaotic. She offered praise and continued instruction, guiding every maneuver, anticipating the turbulence before it hit, positioning herself to absorb its impact first. The storm was far from over. But now, there was hope. For the first time since receiving the distress call, she allowed herself a small, internal exhale. The injured pilot was still alive. She was still alive. They were together in the storm, facing near impossible odds but not yet defeated. And for her, that was enough to push forward long enough to see if survival could be achieved. Every pilot knows that guiding another aircraft in extreme conditions is a test not just of skill, but of nerve, patience, and humanity. Every fraction of a second counts. Every instruction can mean life or death. And in that suspended moment, amidst the chaos of wind, rain, and lightning, she understood that this mission, this impossible, terrifying mission, was the one she had been preparing for all her life. Whether she had known it or not, she continued to guide the spiraling aircraft, voice unwavering, heart pounding, hand steady. The storm raged, the clouds swirled, and the world seemed to shrink to the space between her and the damaged jet. Every command, every micro-adjustment, every moment of vigilance was a thread keeping her life from unraveling completely, and she held on to it. With fuel almost gone, every dial and gauge in her cockpit screamed warnings at her. The fuel gauge hovered dangerously low, numbers blinking in sharp red, a relentless reminder that time was no longer on her side. The engine, strained from hours of battling the storm and maneuvering at impossible angles, began to protest. Subtle shudders, vibrations that were previously negligible, now became ominous warnings of systems pushed to their absolute limits. Every calculation she had made regarding fuel burn, altitude, and speed now had to be revised in real time, every second potentially deciding the difference between survival and catastrophe. Taught her hands, trained over countless hours in simulations, moved automatically, yet every adjustment required a new layer of focus. The cockpit was her entire world, the only space where control could be maintained, where precision could prevail over chaos. Outside, the storm raged relentlessly. Lightning continued to strike the clouds around them, illuminating the sky in brilliant, jagged flashes. Rain lashed at the canopy, and violent gusts threatened to throw her aircraft off course with every second. Turbulence pounded the fuselage like a living force, intent on testing the limits of both pilot and machine. And yet, even as the storm pressed in from all sides, she saw the injured aircraft just ahead. Its movements were erratic, dangerous, unpredictable. The pilot inside was exhausted, injured, and struggling to maintain control. Any miscalculation, any lapse in guidance, could cause the aircraft to spiral completely out of control. She knew that she had no room for error, not for herself, not for the person whose life now rested entirely in her hands. She matched her speed, aligning wing to wing with the damaged aircraft, a maneuver so delicate that no manual, no simulation, and no training scenario could have prepared her for it. The wind currents ripped past them in violent gusts, the clouds twisting and shifting unpredictably. Her jet shuddered under every movement, yet she maintained perfect sync, anticipating every wobble, every pitch, every micro-adjustment necessary to keep the aircraft stable. She became an extension of both her own machine and the one she was guiding, attuned to every vibration, every tremor, every subtle shift in the airflow between the two jets. Her voice became a lifeline tethering the pilot to survival. Keep your wings level. Follow my lead. Steady, steady. Don't make sudden moves. I'm right here, just a little higher, a little to the left. Perfect. She repeated instructions with a calmness that belied the extreme danger surrounding them, each word carefully chosen to minimize panic. Each command a thread holding together the fragile connection between life and death. The injured pilot responded, faint and shaky, yet with enough coordination to follow her guidance. Each small success, a slight correction in pitch, a stabilization of the roll, a reduction in altitude loss, was a victory. And yet, every victory was temporary. The storm was relentless, the echo fragile, and their time running out with every passing second. She monitored fuel levels constantly, aware that if the jet sputtered out at the wrong moment, disaster would be unavoidable. She coordinated their movements, guiding the aircraft toward a safe approach vector. Altitude, speed, and wind currents had to be balanced perfectly. She had to maintain her own aircraft's stability, while simultaneously compensating for the unpredictable movements of the damaged jet. One wrong move, one miscalculation, and both of them could plummet from the sky. Yet she remained composed, calm, precise, an anchor of control in a world dominated by chaos. Lightning flashed again, illuminating the cockpit, the instruments, the swirling clouds, and the aircraft she was guiding. The sudden brilliance revealed every detail of the other jet's battered exterior, from torn panels to smoke trailing faintly from the engine. She calculated every possibility, anticipating the most dangerous shifts in momentum, the sudden gusts, the erratic movements of the damaged craft. Her mind became a map of probabilities, each decision a fork between life and death, each adjustment a chance to tip the scales in favor of survival. Minutes stretched like hours. The world outside became an endless blur of gray clouds, lightning flashes, and rain lashing at her canopy. She spoke continuously, her voice calm, steady, almost rhythmic, a guiding force amidst the storm. Now descend slowly. Keep your nose level. Adjust your speed. Perfect. I'm right here. You're doing great. Just a little more steady. Every word reinforced control. Every instruction reduced chaos. Every syllable tethered the injured pilot's life to her own unwavering focus. She visualized the runway below, distant but real, a line of hope cutting through the darkness and chaos. The landing was the ultimate challenge. She had guided damaged aircraft before in simulations, but nothing compared to this. The combination of extreme turbulence, low fuel, unpredictable wind currents, and a vulnerable co-pilot made this a feat beyond anything she had ever experienced. One wrong alignment, one slight miscalculation in approach, and the fragile aircraft could disintegrate on impact, leaving both of them in ruins. Her hands moved instinctively, her muscles burning from tension and exertion. She monitored instruments, adjusted throttle and trim, banked and pitched, compensating for every gust, every erratic movement, every quiver of the damaged aircraft. She could feel the microcurrents of air between the two planes, the way her jet shielded the other from the worst of the storm. Every maneuver was both delicate and precise, a combination of art, skill, and instinct honed over countless hours of practice but never truly tested until this moment. The pilot inside the damaged aircraft began to respond more consistently, following her commands with increasing accuracy. Small corrections in roll, pitch, and yaw became evident. Small victories that she encouraged, praised, and guided with patient, steady instruction. She maintained the connection through the storm, through fear, through exhaustion, through the thundering roar of wind and rain, a lifeline in human form tethered across the sky. The runway below was approaching. The city lights blurred through the storm, distant but growing, a beacon guiding their descent. She calculated every second, every fraction of a mile, every subtle adjustment needed to align the damaged aircraft for a safe landing. She coordinated with air traffic control, barely audible over static and storm noise, confirming that the path was clear. Every step, every action, every word mattered. Then came the final moments, the most delicate of all. She guided the damaged jet into the final approach, its wings trembling, the engine straining, altitude dangerously low. Steady, steady, lower your landing gear, match my speed, keep level, perfect, almost there. She synchronized movements so closely that the two aircraft moved as one entity, wing to wing, navigating the storm with uncanny precision. One misstep could have sent them both into chaos. One fraction of error could have turned victory into catastrophe. The injured pilot responded perfectly, following her guidance with meticulous care. Inch by inch, the jet aligned with the runway. The wind gusts threatened to throw them off balance at the last second, but she compensated, absorbing the brunt of the turbulence, protecting the fragile aircraft beneath her wing. And then, after what seemed like an eternity, the impossible became reality. The wheels of the damaged aircraft touched the runway, hard but intact. The screech of metal on asphalt echoed through the storm, followed by the rumble of braking systems, and the gentle rocking of a jet finally grounded. Relief surged through her, though her focus remained absolute. She continued to guide the aircraft to a full stop, ensuring that neither she nor the injured pilot lost control until they were completely safe. Silence followed the landing, a stark contrast to the chaos of the past hours. Rain continued to fall, lightning flickered across the sky, but now the danger had passed. She allowed herself a single breath, a moment of acknowledgement that what had been accomplished was extraordinary. A life had been saved, against all odds, in conditions that defied every manual, every rule, every expectation. For the first time in hours, she removed the weight of the storm from her shoulders. She looked at the pilot in the other jet, seeing the exhaustion, the fear, and finally, the relief etched across their face. She knew that their survival was a testament not just to skill, but to courage, to quick thinking, to a willingness to act when rules and protocol said otherwise. She realized that she had done the unthinkable. She had defied orders, challenged danger, and faced a storm both literal and metaphorical, all to save a life. In that moment, the sky had not been a place of duty or routine. It had been a place of heroism, of human connection, of courage tested to its limits, and she had succeeded. The plane landed hard, its tires screeching against the asphalt, metal groaning under the impact, but against every expectation, it remained intact. The storm had not yet fully passed, and the rain pelted down in relentless sheets. Yet somehow, impossibly, both jets had made it to solid ground. Inside the cockpits, pilots exhaled in unison, bodies tense from hours of near-impossible maneuvers, finally allowing themselves a fraction of release. She sat for a moment, gripping the controls, heart hammering, lungs burning from controlled breaths, as the aircraft rolled to a full stop. Outside, the world remained chaotic. Lightning flashed in the distance. The storm's roar still filled the sky, but down here, on the runway, there was a fragile, victorious stillness. She unbuckled her harness slowly, every movement deliberate. The adrenaline still coursed through her veins, a reminder of how close they had come to disaster. Her hands were steady, but her mind replayed the flight in excruciating detail. Every microsecond of turbulence, every calculated maneuver, every instruction she had given the injured pilot, it all came back in sharp, vivid clarity. She realized that despite every doubt, every rule, every warning, she had made the right choice. That realization was both exhausting and exhilarating. People began to gather near the runway. At first, a few technicians and ground crew cautiously approached, eyes wide with disbelief and relief. Then more arrived: pilots, officers, and even strangers who had come to watch the storm's aftermath. Applause erupted, hesitant at first, then louder, swelling into a chorus of cheers that echoed across the base. Some people cried openly, overcome by the magnitude of what had just happened. Strangers hugged one another, relief and gratitude spilling into the air, mingling with the rain and the fading rumble of the storm. The base, usually disciplined and orderly, had been transformed into a scene of raw human emotion. She stepped out of the cockpit, her uniform soaked from rain and sweat, hair plastered to her forehead, but her posture remained impeccable. Every pair of eyes seemed to fall on her, searching for acknowledgement, searching for the person responsible for the impossible feat they had just witnessed. Her jaw was tight, her breathing heavy, but her mind was already moving forward, replaying every detail of the flight. And yet, she allowed herself a small, private smile, a quiet recognition that she had succeeded where others might have failed. Command arrived soon after. Their expressions a mixture of awe, relief, and disbelief. Their eyes scanned the runway, the intact jets, and the gathering crowd. Then, slowly, the truth dawned on them. She had disobeyed direct orders. She had broken formation. She had flown into dangerous, restricted airspace, defying protocol and risking her own life. And yet, despite all of that, she had saved a life that might have been lost if she had simply obeyed orders and returned to the routine mission. The weight of that realization settled over the officers like a physical presence. It was impossible to ignore. Here was a pilot who had not just followed procedure, but had chosen humanity, courage, and instinct over rigid rules. The injured pilot, now safely on the ground, emerged from the other jet, still shaken, still pale, but alive. The first thing they did was run toward her, stumbling slightly on the wet tarmac, and embraced her tightly. Words failed them. Gratitude, relief, and awe were expressed in that single, powerful gesture. Tears streamed down their face, soaking into her uniform as they clung to her, their voice shaking. "You saved me, you saved my life." She held the embrace, allowing herself a moment to feel the magnitude of what had happened. It wasn't just about the skill, the precision, or the daring maneuvers. It was about the human connection, about the choice to act when no one else could, about the courage to stand up in the face of rules and say, quietly but resolutely, someone's life matters more than protocol. The crowd around them grew silent for a moment, giving space to the raw emotion, then erupted again into applause and cheering. People shouted her call sign, now spoken not as a piece of technical identification, but as a name that carried weight, honor, and respect. In that moment, she was no longer just another fighter pilot. She had become something more, something extraordinary, a hero defined not by medals, ranks, or victories, but by a single, selfless act of courage that saved her life. News spread quickly through the base. Stories were shared about her decisive actions, her daring maneuvers, and the impossible conditions she had faced. Officers and fellow pilots recounted the details of the flight, marveling at her ability to maintain calm and precision under extreme duress. The storm outside became secondary to the storm she had navigated within herself, a test of nerve, judgment, and humanity. Her reputation, previously just another name in the roster, became legend within hours, yet she remained composed. She did not seek accolades or recognition. She answered questions with humility, explaining the choices she had made with clarity and simplicity. "I did what I had to do," she said quietly, the words carrying more weight than any official commendation ever could. "The person needed help. I had the skills. I did what anyone should do." And that, more than anything else, defined her. Heroism. True courage does not always announce itself with grandeur or ceremony. Often it is quiet, measured, and deliberate, expressed in the moment when no one is watching, when the consequences are highest and when the stakes are painfully. Humitia acted not for glory, not for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones who choose humanity over protocol. The base slowly returned to normal, though the memory of the day would linger in everyone's mind for years. Pilots returned to their hangars, crews to their stations, and the storm moved on, leaving clear skies in its wake. Yet the story of her actions continued to ripple through the ranks, shared over meals, during briefings, and in quiet conversations between those who had witnessed or heard about the miraculous rescue. It became a symbol of what courage truly meant, the ability to act decisively in the face of impossible odds, guided not just by training but by conscience. Later, as she finally removed her helmet, letting the rain wash over her, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought about the hours spent in turbulence, the close brush with disaster, the fear that had clawed at her chest, and the exhilaration of seeing the other pilots survive. Every detail, every heartbeat, every split-second decision replayed in her mind like a vivid, unending film. And yet, rather than dwelling on danger or risk, she focused on the outcome: life saved, a person returned to the world, and a lesson in the power of courage and compassion. Our command formally acknowledged her actions in the days that followed. Awards and commendations were discussed, but she remained humble, emphasizing the collective effort and the importance of human choice. She often said, "Rules are there for a reason, but sometimes the right thing is to act with your heart and your judgment." That day, that's what mattered most. Her story became a lesson for all who flew after her, a reminder that courage and humanity could coexist with discipline and skill. The flight logs would record her maneuvers, the technical analysis would examine her choices, but what mattered most was the human story. A pilot who chose to save a life, who navigated impossible odds, who trusted her instincts and her skill, and who became more than a name on a roster. She became a symbol. She became the reason someone went home alive, not through recklessness, not through luck, but through skill, courage, and the unwavering belief that human life mattered above all else. That day, she proved that true heroism is not defined by medals, orders, or routine victories, but by the willingness to act when it matters most, when the risk is highest, and when the stakes are irreversibly human, and sometimes the greatest. Heroes are the ones who choose humanity over protocol. Her name would live on not just in reports or files, but in the memory of the person she saved, in the stories shared across the base, in the hearts of those who understood what it truly meant to act with courage, compassion, and skill in the face of impossible odds. She was no longer just another fighter pilot. She had become an emblem of bravery, a testament to the human spirit, and a reminder that even in a world bound by rules, protocol, and hierarchy, the choice to do what is right can define history. In the end, as the storm clouds finally cleared and the sky above opened to sunlight, she stood quietly, watching the runway, watching the jets, and allowing herself a single unguarded moment of pride. She had faced fear, defied orders, fought against impossible odds, and emerged victorious. And in that victory, she had discovered what all heroes eventually realize: courage is not measured by compliance, by obedience, or by routine. It is measured by the willingness to act, to protect, to save, and to place humanity above all else. She walked away from the runway that day, not for recognition, not for reward, but because her mission had been accomplished. And sometimes, that alone is enough to define a hero.